this is maybe a shadow exploration, something like that.
Yes.
And then I thought like I was kind of a dimwit for not catching that earlier. But you know, it is shocking. These are very
Yes.
manipulative laws, let's say. And so can you guide me through the rationale for producing material like that? What are you trying to do with your books? And they've obviously been misunderstood. It says in Wikipedia, Greene's books are sometimes described as manipulative and amoral. And so clear this up for me.
Well, that it's a bit manipulative when people write that, because a great deal of the 48 laws of power, I'd say, maybe 2/3 of them are not manipulative, have nothing to do with deception. They have things to do with kind of common sense ideas about power, such as being generous with people, such as creating compelling spectacles, such as entering action with boldness and kind of how you present yourself, sort of things about your image and your appearance. But there are definitely some laws that are quite manipulative. And then my other books don't really go into things like that. So it is a bit of a distortion to write that. But where this comes from is basically, I have a particular idea of power. So maybe I should explain that a little bit. My idea of power, it's not about this kind of grand thing of political or war or something. It's on a very individual level. And the idea for me comes from Nietzsche and his idea of the will to power, which he explains as every organism has a desire to expand itself, has a desire for expansion. And so I think that for human beings, the desire that we have this innate propensity for wanting to expand beyond our limits. We want to feel like we have some degree of ability to influence other people, that we can control our own career and learn more and develop greater skills and have more kind of power and influence in our life. The feeling that I cannot have any power or influence over my children, my spouse, my colleagues, my boss, my career in general is deeply, deeply unsettling for the human animal and causes all kinds of attempts at what I call negative power, passive aggression, etc., setting yourself up as a victim to kind of leverage power in a negative way. And so the problem is, a lot of this comes from Machiavelli, who inspired a lot of the 48 laws. The problem is that we live in a world where this desire for some kind of power butts up against kind of codes of behavior that have gotten stricter and stricter and stricter, particularly in the 21st century, about what is acceptable, about what is politically correct. So we're supposed to appear to be these paragons of virtue, these paragons of fairness and democracy, et cetera. At the same time, we're all trying to angle for different degrees of power in our work, in our relationships, et cetera. And so because of that dynamic, we have to be extremely careful in this world. And I compare it to the courts of like Louis XIV, where all of the courtiers, if they're too overt in their power moves, the king will disapprove of them and will not banish them, but they'll be kind of excluded to the corner of the palace. And so the game was to be sort of indirect, to be polite and ingratiating. And if you had an enemy, to know how to kind of very quietly get rid of them. And so this is kind of where the 48 laws of power came out from. So you quoted me, I had like 80 different jobs, probably more like 60, 65. But I saw all kinds of very deceptive games being played continually in the various different jobs I had. And I worked in every conceivable field. And I didn't see any kind of honesty about this dynamic in the human world. And it really kind of irritated me. All the self-help books were sort of describing a world that I never saw existed. I saw people being very political, having egos and having problems with their egos. And I didn't see any books like they're kind of describing what I had encountered every day. So law number one is never outshine the master. And the idea is that if you try too hard to impress your boss or the person above you, you're liable to make them feel insecure. You're going to trip on their ego and something bad will happen to you, right? And so this seemed like the fact that people have egos and operate with egos and you have to be careful with them seems very clear to me, but I didn't find books out there that were describing it. So I hope this kind of gives you an idea, a little bit of the context where the book came from.
Well, so I can't remember who sent me this. I think it was Clay Routledge. Yeah, I think that's right. He just sent me a survey that this organization he works with has completed, stating that something like 40% of millennials don't feel they have any control over their life.
Right.
So that is related to the first issue that you brought up. And you obviously consider that problematic. And you said that, well, it's good for us to have some control over our destinies and also to feel that that's a possibility, to see it at least as a goal.
Yes.
And that if we feel consciously thwarted in that goal or believe that it's impossible, that doesn't mean we're going to give up our striving. It means it's going to go underground, and then it's going to manifest itself in all sorts of deceptive ways.
Exactly.
And then you said that you were interested in Nietzsche's idea of will to power as, in some sense, the central motivation of the organism across species to some degree.